It's rather predictable that the Ethics Committee would strike down a motion put forth by the Conservatives with respect to bringing back Cabinet Ministers Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott to testify with respect to SNC Lavalin. But I'm wondering if we can get your perspective on, I guess, the underhanded information that is being leaked, if you will, from both the PMO's camp and from Jody Wilson-Raybould.
Yes, the one preceding the other. Well, first of all, on the Ethics Committee, it's predictable maybe, but it's sad. It's sad because you would think even supporters of the government would have some ethical compass, would want to get to the bottom of this. It is, whether you think something went on or something didn't, I don't see why anybody would be against wanting to know. And so for the committee members to simply vote the party line on that, particularly Nate Erskine-Smith, who had carved out a bit of a reputation as a maverick, and who was left to kind of carry the can in explaining this, where they said, well, we didn't need to have an Ethics Committee investigation because there's one ongoing at the Justice Committee, which is just simply not true. They've shut that investigation down, such as it was. So that's all very sad. It's a particularly sad moment when, in an effort to try and smear the credibility of his own former Minister of Justice, the Prime Minister's office, and I don't think there's any doubt that it was they who leaked this, basically smear the reputation of a very respected Manitoba Justice, Chief Justice of the Manitoba Court of Queen's Bench. Basically, the story makes him out to be some crazed right-winger who would bring back back-alley abortions, etc. There's just simply no evidence that he's anything of the kind. He's a mainstream, respected jurist. But it was used to kind of make her look like she was had some sort of faulty judgment that she'd suddenly decided to bring in a crazed social conservative. It's just really, really sad. I agree with you that it's also unfortunate that she, again, one has to assume it would have been come from her or somebody close to her leaking a contrary version of events. But I think it's clear who is dragging us into that muck, and that's the Prime Minister's office. I don't think there's any reason to mince words on this. They have decided, and you can see this in Liberal messaging, that they're going to go after Philpott and Wilson-Raybould in the most personal terms, painting them as just either strangely vindictive against the Prime Minister for who knows what reason, or as publicity seekers. I've seen this kind of messaging, or as naifs who didn't understand the way politics works, which is kind of hard to square with the theory that they're also these hardened political operatives who are trying to take the Prime Minister down. It's disgraceful. There's just no other word for it.
Listening to you speak, you've mentioned the Supreme Court, the Justice Committee, the Ethics Committee, the Prime Minister's office. There are some real stalwart Canadian institutions that are being damaged here.
Absolutely, and beginning with the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. The whole justice system is, it's a precious thing. The power that we give the state to prosecute somebody, to charge them, to prosecute them, to throw them in jail is an enormous one. And so we set up really careful silos at every point of the system. Only the police, for example, can lay charges. Only the prosecutors can decide whether to take those charges to court. So the prosecutors can't get in the business of laying the charges, and the police can't get in the business of who gets to court. The prosecutors decide who gets to which cases get prosecuted without interference from people above them, from the political side, with the sole and very narrow exception that the Attorney General, in extraordinary circumstances, can issue a directive to the Director of Public Prosecutions. But she has to do it in writing, it has to be in public, etc. And it's never been done. So that office was set up to be very independent, and the Attorney General's independence from the rest of the Cabinet is absolute as well. It's even more absolute. So we did this to make, really sure that we wouldn't have politicized prosecutions. We wouldn't have elected politicians deciding whether to favor their friends by not prosecuting them or to punish their enemies by prosecuting them. So it's a really big deal if anybody goes anywhere near to trying to interfere with that. You don't have to paint, disaster scenarios that this government's a dictatorship or anything. That's not the issue. The issue is they started messing around with a criminal prosecution when they shouldn't have been doing so. And we have to blow the whistle on that if anybody's even coming close to that. And when somebody does blow the whistle, we don't seem to have a very good method of holding people to account.
Should caucus be big enough to have all kinds of voices?
Of course, and including people who don't have confidence in the leader. Look, in Britain, Prime Minister May has been going through countless coup attempts, and nobody says, oh, everybody who is involved with that has to leave the party. It's one of the things that people in a proper democratic party should be able to disagree on, is who they want to be the leader. And if you don't want Trudeau to be leader. Of course, you can't be in his cabinet. That's fine. Everyone understands that. And maybe you're not going to be in line for plum committee postings, and everything, but you're still part of the party, and you still represent your riding association. And as long as your riding association and the electors of that riding want you to represent them, then this notion that unless you're just a fervent loyalist of the leader that you can't be a member of the party is preposterous. But that's how centralized and leader-dominated our politics has become. And frankly, that centralization and leader domination is precisely the kind of thing that leads to these kinds of issues of interfering with the prosecution. You know, too much power in any centralized location, eventually it'll get abused.